Yan at iba pa pong detalye sa vaccine roadmap ng gobyerno ang ating ngayong pag-uusapan. Kasama po sina Vaccine Czar, NTF Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. At mula naman po sa Department of Health ay sina Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire at Director Ariel Valencia, Task Group on Cold Chain and Logistics Management. Welcome po sa public briefing. Secretary Galvez, para po bigyan ang taong bayan ng pinakahuling update sa vaccine procurement at logistics, narito po ang ating Vaccine Czar at NTF Chief Implementer Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. Secretary, good morning po.
Galvez Jr. Secretary, good morning po.
Good morning, USec Rocky, at sa lahat ng ating mga nanonood nakikinig sa ating programa. Sa ngalan po ng bumubuo ng National Task Force against COVID-19, isang magandang araw po sa ating lahat. Next slide please. Kinakagalak ko po na ibalita ng ating pong COVAX facility para sa Pilipinas ay naaprubahan na po. Sa loob po na posibilidad na makasiguro na mayroon tayo pong mga 30 to 40 million na doses for free para po sa lahat sa ating mga kabayan. Kaya po nagpe-prepare na po tayo. Nakita po natin yung pinablis po na guidelines from COVAX ng confirmation of participation. So nagagalak po, napakagandang balita po ito at saka talagang nagpe-prepare na po tayo dito sa ating mga cold chain. Next slide please. Dahil inaasahan na darating na bakuna tulad ng COVAX, we are presently negotiating with 18 logistics companies with 4 companies with ultra-cold storage capacity. Ito po ay bahagi ng paghahanda ng gobyerno sa mga darating na bakuna. This is to ensure that we have zero wastage para makasiguro na bakuna ay makarating sa ating mga kababayan, walang masasayang, walang matatapon, at ang efficacy ay ma-preserve at ma-maintain sa kanyang original state. Next slide please. Ito po ang dahilan kung bakit natin binisita kasama po natin ang ating IATF Chairman and Health Secretary Francisco Duque sa iba't ibang mga cold chain facilities sa pharmaceutical companies kahapon, kasama po ang RITM. Bibisitahin din po namin ang mga ibang mga cold chain facility in the next visit next week. Ang nakita po namin, ang conclusion po namin, we have adequate cold storage capacity for all types of COVID vaccines, ranging from that to be stored at 2 to 8 degrees, negative 20, as well as yung mga delicate na negative 70 to 80 degrees centigrade. Halimbawa po, ang Unilab ay maaari po makapag-store ng 5 million doses at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. Nandiyan din po ang Swedish Pharmaceutical na maaaring makapag-store ng 40 million dosage for negative 50 to negative 25 degrees. Mayroon po silang ultra-low freezers that can store 6.5 million doses under 80 degrees. At mayroon po silang capability ng 642 million doses para naman po sa 2 to 8 degrees na bakuna. So nakita po natin na talagang napakalaki po na capacity ng mga natin sa Sweden. Next slide please. So yan po, yung nakita natin sa picture, ito po pinuntahan namin po yan sa Swilig at talagang ako ay namangha. Talagang very professional at saka maganda po ang kanilang pharma grade cold storage. Tinignan po namin yung mga bay, nalulula po ako dahil talagang napakalaki po ng lugar. At saka po, ang maganda po dito, mayroon po tayong ganyang klase na storage dito sa Manila, sa Cebu at sa Davao. Ibig sabihin, kaya natin kahit anong mga vaccine na klase from Pfizer, Moderna at saka yung AstraZeneca at ang iba-ibang ating mga vaccines ay kayang-kaya na po nating store. Next slide please. Nagpunta rin po kami sa RITM, sa Research Institute for Tropical Medicine upang maging katuwang sa ating partners para pagdagdag ng ultra cold chain storage. At nakita rin namin po, meron po silang 5 negative 70-80 na freezer na can accommodate more than 1 million dosage. At kami po yung natutuwa na ang RITM ay they are now well prepared. Next slide. At nakita po natin ang ating mga LGUs, lalo na dito sa Metro Manila, ay talagang excited na sa pagdating ng ating mga bakuna. nagsagawa po sila ng mga simulation exercise. Nakita natin sa kabilang picture sa left side, nakita natin na excited na talaga si Mayor Isko na talagang nagkaroon po ng simulation siya ng mga nagdaang araw. Then kahapon po, ang Pasig, nagkaroon din po siya ng tinatawag nating simulation exercises. And then also yung Taguig, talagang nakita natin si Mayor Lino na talagang prepared na at kanyang binisita yung Orca na cold storage na talagang nakakatuwa. So yun po, nakikita po natin, all the LGUs are now very prepared and excited na makarating sa atin ang mga bakuna. At tayo po ay makakaasa na ngayong darating na buwan ay mayroon na po tayong darating na mga bakuna. Maraming salamat, USec Rocky, at back to you.
Opo, salamat po, Secretary Galvez. Mamaya po may tanong po ang media para sa inyo, Secretary. Para naman talakayin ang update sa mga inaprobahang EUA, ang mga isinasagawang clinical trials sa bansa at karagdagang impormasyon ukol po sa cold chain at logistics. Para sa mga paparating na bakuna, may update din po ang Department of Health, Spokesperson Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire. USec, good morning po. Nawala ulit po si USec Vergeire. Babalikan na. Okay. Sa puntong ito, bigyan daan po muna natin ang katanungan na tungkol po sa aksyon ng pamahalaan tungkol sa COVID-19 vaccines. Para po kay Secretary Galvez, babalikan po natin mamaya si USec Vergeire. Secretary, base po sa nangyaring pagbisita sa mga cold storage facilities kahapon, masasabi bang sapat po yung kapasidad ng mga facilities na ito para po sa pagdating ng milyong-milyong dosage ng vaccine sa bansa? Secretary.
Nakikita ko po, USec Rocky, prepared na prepared tayo kasi ang nakita natin na more or less is cold chain facility. Nakita nyo naman, very modern at saka talagang very safe. Talagang yung capacity talaga adequate. Sabi nga ni Secretary Duque, very adequate at saka very secure yung mga facilities. Tiningnan namin talaga yung dalawang facilities ng Unilab and also RITM and also yung Swilig, pati yung packaging nila, yung magkakaroon ng tinatawag na transport, lahat, pati yung training ng mga personnel and also yung mga talagang katulad ng mga critical na mga vaccine katulad ng Pfizer and Moderna. Nakita nyo sa picture, talagang mayroong mga mga ice box na pwede talagang i-transport sa iba-ibang mga lugar.
Opo, Secretary, kanina po naibalita natin yung kumpirmasyon nga po sa paglahok ng Pilipinas sa COVAX facility. So ano po ba ang ibig sabihin ng COVAX facility at bakit mahalaga po yung pagsali dito?
Mahalaga po yung COVAX facility kasi nakita po natin yung vaccine po na bibigay po dito ng WHO, UNICEF at saka ng Gavi COVAX ay libre po yun. At saka magagandang tinatawag nating validated ng WHO. Kasama po ang Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Covax at saka tinatawag natin yung Johnson & Johnson. Ito mga talagang tinitingnan natin at saka yung Sinovac, nag-apply din. So nakikita po natin na talagang ito po ay free. At the same time, it will be delivered to us. So napaka-importante po yun. Talagang ito po ay it is a global interest na we can contain yung virus through the WHO concept of equitable access to poor countries like us.
Opo, Secretary, babalikan po muna natin si Department of Health Spokesperson Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire. USec, good morning po ulit.
Good morning po, USec Rocky. Magandang umaga po, Secretary Charlie, and good morning to all of our viewers.
Opo, go ahead, USec Vergeire.
Yes, ma'am. So magandang umaga po uli sa inyong lahat. Kami po ngayon ay magbibigay ng kaunting updates regarding clinical trials, emergency use authorization, cold chain, and logistics management. Together with me will be Director Ariel Valencia from our supply chain management office. So ito pong atin pong, can we have the slides please? So for the vaccine clinical trials, so alam po natin lahat na ang vaccine development is a very meticulous process. These are carefully designed and reviewed to determine safety and efficacy of the products being studied. So importante po na dapat malaman natin na mga bakuna ay tinetest sa healthy individuals. So this would entail more stringent protocols to safeguard the health of the participants as seen in this slide. So next slide please. So yung susunod po na slide dito, ito po yung sa Emergency Use Authority. As a result of clinical trials and the recommendations coming from our vaccine experts panel, the Philippine Food and Drug Administration shall appropriately evaluate the registration of vaccines. The FDA now can grant the EUA or the Emergency Use Authority based on the core principles of safety, efficacy, and risk-benefit analysis. A certificate of product registration can only be given after evaluation on the review of completeness, while an EUA can be granted after the review of interim data of phase 3 trials in the time of an emergency. So next slide, please. So last December 1, the President signed Executive Order number 121, granting the FDA the authority to issue emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccines. The FDA Circular 2020-036 was also released last December 14 to serve as guidelines on the process and the list of requirements for EUA application. Next slide, please. So an EUA shall only be valid when all of the following circumstances are present. First, there is the totality of evidence na available, including data from adequate and well-known controlled trials. It is reasonable to believe that a drug or vaccine may be effective to prevent, diagnose, or treat COVID-19. Second, the known and potential benefits of the drug or vaccine when used to diagnose, prevent, or treat COVID-19 outweigh the known and potential risk of the drug or vaccine, if any. And third, that there is no adequate, approved, and available alternative to the drug or vaccine for diagnosing, preventing, or treating COVID-19. Next slide, please. Pahong slide pagkatapos niyan. In evaluating applications, the Food and Drug Administration has the power to implement reliance and recognition process for emergency use of drugs and vaccines. Recognition shall refer to the acceptance of the regulatory decision of another trusted institution. It shall be based on evidence of conformity that the regulatory requirements of the reference regulatory authority are sufficient to meet the regulatory requirements of the relying authority. Reliance shall refer to the act whereby the NRA in one jurisdiction may take into account and give significant weight to assessments performed by another NRA or trusted institution, or to any other authoritative information in reaching its own decision. So the FDA may accept the regulatory decisions of the WHO, the USCDC, and other internationally recognized and established regulatory authorities. So the expert panel, as shown in this slide, they conduct the review of available data on safety and effectiveness, and they also submitted their reports and recommendations to the Food and Drug Administration. Second, validity. The EUA is valid only within the duration of the declared public health emergency due to COVID-19. Without prejudice to the discretion of the FDA, they can revisit or revoke the same as may be appropriate to protect general public health and safety. And for post-marketing authorization, the Food and Drug Administration, together with DOH, shall conduct post-authorization monitoring to track product deployment, additional relevant information, the status from the manufacturer concerning full product life cycle. And the holder of the EUA is required to complete specific pharmacovigilance obligations with a view to provide comprehensive data confirming a positive benefit-risk balance. Next slide, please. Now, as to the cold chain and logistics management, next slide, please. This figure shows the milestones and roadmap for distribution and supply. These are divided into three phases: the pre-implementation, the implementation, and the post-implementation. Through this, we can see the complexity of the vaccine delivery process. Assessment identified the strengths and gaps of our end-to-end supply chain. Yesterday, the Philippines received the country's confirmation of participation in the COVID-19 Vaccine Financing Instrument, or the COVAX facility, the Advanced Market Commitment. So as what Secretary Galvez has mentioned, COVAX facility is this global procurement mechanism which invests in a broad portfolio of promising vaccine candidates. And the country is set to receive vaccines in the first quarter of the year. So as part also of its preparation, our Secretary Duque, and the Vaccine Czar, Secretary Galvez, conducted inspection of our ITM to assess our capacities. And the facility has been designated as the country's national vaccine storage hub since 2019. So at present, as what Secretary Galvez has mentioned, our ITM has 4 cold rooms for storage with 2 to 8 degrees centigrade temperature range, 1 walk-in freezer for those with negative 20 degrees, and 5 ultra-low temperature freezers that need to be kept within negative 70 to negative 80 degrees centigrade. The cold rooms are currently at 93 capacity, while the walk-in freezer is at 50.89% capacity. The ultra-low temperature freezers are still unutilized. The inspection team also visited Unilab and Zuinig, and Secretary Galvez already have given you the information. Next slide, please. As to the distribution plan modeling for COVID-19 vaccines, the supply chain process will involve, first, the receipt of vaccines in the Philippines from the manufacturers. Second, the storage. Third, preparation of vaccines for distribution. And fourth would be the delivery of logistics to its locations. Next slide, please. So the manner of distribution of vaccines will depend on the storage requirements for each type of vaccine. Can we go a little further on dun po sa slide ng vaccine distribution? So for vaccines requiring 2 to 8 degrees storage, the vaccines will be delivered from the supplier to the RITM, which will serve as the government centralized vaccine hub. From RITM, vaccines will be passed on to the regional warehouses or hubs, wherein our DOH Centers for Health Development, in coordination with our logistic partners, shall deliver the vaccines to our LGUs. The LGUs will then allocate vaccines to its implementing units such as medical centers, hospitals, infirmaries, RHUs and CHOs, and private clinics, where the vaccine will be administered to the eligible recipients. The distribution process for vaccines requiring negative 20 centigrade storage will utilize the same process used for vaccines requiring 2 to 8 degrees. For vaccines requiring negative 70 to 80, the vaccines will be delivered from the supplier to a private centralized vaccine hub. And through a private distributor, the vaccines will be delivered to our hospitals and medical centers with cold chain capacity to store the vaccine. Next slide, please. As to the Philippine cold storage facilities ready for COVID-19 vaccine arrival, as part of these preparations, as we have said, the 3 cold storage facilities that can potentially be used in the first wave of COVID-19 vaccine rollout were visited yesterday. So the inspection was carried out to ensure that these cold chain facilities will meet the storage requirement of vaccines prior to its distribution to identified vaccination sites. And as what Secretary Galvez has mentioned, we have cold chain facilities. These 3 would be used: the first Pioneer Distribution Center of Unilab, the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, and the Zuinig Pharma Corporation in Parañaque City. So that is the last of my slides. So we'd like to thank everyone for their unity and service, and we'd like to also say that we are already prepared, as what Secretary Galvez has mentioned. We are just finalizing some of the implementation arrangements, but the government, through DOH, through the National Task Force, and of course through our Vaccine Czar, has already prepared the requirements and the other logistical issues concerned with this vaccine deployment plan. Over to you, USec Rocky.
Okay, salamat po, USec Vergeire.